Hello, welcome to the Comic Coach podcast with me, Em Stroud, indeed the Comic Coach, and today it's super exciting. Kevin and I have just been chatting, and I suddenly realised that we'd already been chatting for 20 minutes before it even pressed record. So yes, on the Comic Coach podcast, we're going to be chatting to the fabulous Kevin Chasters. Hello, Kevin. You all right?
Very good. Yeah, very good indeed.
Yeah, look at that. That's our intro, John. It's good, isn't it?
That's good. Yeah, it was 10%. That's good. Finished in a minute.
Yeah, this is going to be the quickest Comic Coach podcast of all time because Kevin and I are just so efficient when we're actually just talking all about these things. And so how are you? How is your world? Are you good and happy?
Yeah, very good. Lots of interesting things on with lots of interesting people. It's always a good place to start. Bit tired today. Drove 6 hours up a motorway this morning, but I'll try not to fall asleep or whilst we're chatting. Yeah, good.
I mean, I always think it's a good start of any podcast. I'm not being asleep during it.
Yes, it's normally pretty good, isn't it? To have a conversation, it does normally need.
It's kind of become my preferred style.
And yeah, good. Sun shining, fridge is full. All good.
Lovely. Now, of course, my regular listeners will know that this podcast. I wanted to do it because I'm really genuinely curious about how do we as people create more impact, both in our lives and as leaders? And you have done many different cool things, which I'm sure we may or may not get to. But I always like to start the podcast with my 6 questions about impact. And suddenly it also means that I get to turn into like Quizmaster, which is very exciting. So are you ready, Kevin, for the 6 questions?
Is there going to be a timer or something coming up in the top?
No, nothing dramatic is going to happen. It's just that.
Fine, yeah.
Like
no right, wrong answer. I give you the wrong answer, right?
Yes, no. You literally, whatever you say is going to be correct because it is your answer. So,
Perfect.
It's like the easiest quiz of the world to win. That's what I've just realised. That is what I've created. In fact, you know what? I'm going to ditch this whole Comic Coach malarkey and suddenly it's going to be like the easiest quiz to win. Everybody wins. Anyway, back to the point. Right, pulling myself back in, focused. Question number 1. I don't know why I've always loved doing that. Question number 1. It's like the lights have gone down. It's all like that. Who has had the greatest impact on your life?
If I'm allowed more than one, I would say 2 people, my wife and my mum. In that order, weirdly, because you imagine that the mum would be first and then the one. But yeah, my wife probably the most impact on my life. Mostly just for her support in whatever stupid idea I have. She's kind of gone along with it and been there to support me and be the biggest cheerleader and make me feel good about myself. And I think we all need that all the time. My mum probably, in terms of weirdly professionally, probably my mother, despite the fact that she left school at the age of 17 to be a nurse and worked as a nurse in the NHS until the day she retired. So it had nothing to do with what I do for a living, never worked in business, never worked in comms or marketing or advertising. But I think it was what she always instilled in me was this belief that you could do whatever it is you wanted to do. And she was always a huge supporter of mine. And even when I was little, she was always a huge supporter of mine. And I don't think I really appreciated that until I got older. Particularly in a couple of things which we could get into now or we could get into later.
Yeah,
you said I'd done some things, some sort of cool things. One of the things I used to go to the TED conference every year in Vancouver. And I did a main stage TED talk, but like a sort of 60 minutes. That'd be the most boring TED talk in the world. 60 seconds, this gave me 60 seconds. I spoke for 60 minutes. But it was, I did a 60-second stage talk in the main TED, but I did a TEDx talk here in the UK and I based it on something that my mother had done when I was a kid. And I was diagnosed autistic when I was 48 years old, but clearly I've been autistic all my life. But back then, no one really knew about it or did anything about it. And clearly the signs were there. So when I was growing up, it always takes a bit of explanation of where I grew up. was in a world that was entirely populated by individually named plastic dinosaurs. So I lived in my head in a world that was entirely basically created by dinosaurs.
Right.
And I devised all sorts of things for it. A currency, a 6-tiered pyramid football system, map, political systems, everything, right? And then when I was about 7 years old, came back from summer holiday, and we had to write a little story about what did you do during your holidays.
Right.
And everyone wrote that they'd gone to Pontins at Canvas Sands, or they'd gone to stay with their gran or whatever. And I wrote a very, very long essay about the fact that I'd spent the summer mediating a war on a planet between scorpions and dinosaurs, and handed this in, didn't think anything of it. Now, I only found out about this years later. They brought my mother to the school and told her that I had a problem with my imagination, a serious problem, and I couldn't tell the difference between fantasy and reality, and they were worried that I was mentally ill. And my mother told them that if she ever heard them use the words imagination and problem in the same sentence again, she'd take me out of the school. And I never found out about this for years. My mother just basically, and then my mother came home and just bought me a shitload of dinosaurs. And my mother encouraged all this. She thought it was amazing. And that's kind of who my mum was. And she always just sort of encouraged me and told me I could do whatever it is I wanted to do. And I'm sure a bit later, I might reference the book that I wrote. And although I dedicated it to my wife, the inspiration for it was my mum, who'd said all of her life that she would write a book, and the book is encouraging creativity in the world, and because we're always told to put that away when we grow up. And my mum loved English, loved writing, loved doing all this stuff, and was told when she was 16, right, now stop doing that, Rosemary, go and get yourself a job. So she didn't do what she wanted to do in her life. She went and was a nurse for 40 years. And then when she retired, she said she'd write, by which point she was like, oh, I'm tired, I can't do it. And then when I wrote the book, the inscription in the copy I gave to her says, now you've got no excuse, go write your book. And she died about 3 months later. And so she never wrote her book. And that's the thing for me that everyone should. Anyway, long answer to a short question. My wife is my biggest supporter, and my mum is my biggest inspiration.
I mean, thank you. And, hello, Rosemary, wherever you are floating around, it's so awesome to hear, that story of that positive parenting going, no,
I'm so lucky.
I'm saying you can't be
so lucky. Because, of course, when you grow up, if you grow up in an asylum... I'm
still waiting for that time. I'm yet to have got that memo.
We'll come on to that in a minute, won't we? But I think that if you grow up in an asylum, you just assume the world is mad, because that's your reality. So I had the most incredible parents, the most incredible encouragement, probably too much encouragement, actually. They probably should have told me to shut up once in a while. But I just thought everybody had that. And it was only when I started to get into my sort of late teens, early 20s, and then in my adulthood, that I've realized just how rare it is and just how fortunate I was to be surrounded with, love and encouragement, which is so much more important in many ways than being surrounded with money or whatever, it's...
Yeah, completely. And I love hearing how that, she just was like, no, to the system, because there's so much about systems that aren't great, in terms of how we grow up and creativity being squashed into nice, neat little boxes and things like that. So yeah, well done your mum. Well done your mum. Brilliant.
I mean, she was a massive pain. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, of course, because she's also human. So we're not going to, we're not, let's, it's something like, there came the teenager. She was a nightmare.
Every every trait in me that I can't stand. That's the thing, isn't it? It's like you see it reflected, and
Of course.
Anyway.
Of course.
But
how
definitely a
lovely.
lot more positives than negatives.
And how lovely that, both these two women have had such an impact in your life. I love it. What keeps you, this is question number 2, in case you hadn't realised, moving it on swiftly, just in case you're listening and you're like, oh, hang on a second, Em, where are you going now? I'm like, question number 2, there we go, I've got a structure. I might be a comic, but I've got structure. What keeps you motivated in what you do?
I think there's an honest answer to that, and then there's a sort of official answer to that, and then there's probably another one that's somewhere between the two. I mean, the sort of professional answer, which is also true, is I'm endlessly curious, right? I mean, I get motivated by, this is quite useful because I'm autistic, medically autistic.
As opposed to any other kind?
Yeah, actually, no, I would say, a lot of people sort of go, oh, I'm a little bit on the spectrum.
Right.
In the same way people say, oh, I'm a little bit OCD just because they've organised their CDs. You go, you're not OCD. My niece has OCD. It's incredibly debilitating,
Yeah.
So people do say, oh, he's a bit autistic. And that's why I sort of distinguish. You go, are you actually diagnosed autistic, or are you just a bit obsessive about things? So so one of the traits of autism is a condition called monotropism, where you get very fixated on one thing and you kind of just get very, very monotropic about it. Mm-hmm. That's very useful for my career because, for 24 hours, I will find whether people who drive Datsuns eat baked beans the most interesting question I've ever been asked in the history of questions. Do you know what I mean?
And the answer is yes.
It is,
I just need to let you know. Yes, yeah.
Well, it is for 24 hours. I always find that most questions are like the difference between Mr. Right and Mr. Right Now, I kind of just get very, very monotropic about things. So I'm very motivated by curiosity. I just find things fascinating. And I didn't know, obviously, for most of my life why this was the case. So that's one thing that keeps me motivated. The sort of most honest answer to it is my chronic fear of failure.
Okay, yeah.
All my life I've had this chronic fear that this time I won't find the answer. This time, and it probably comes from the fact that I got sacked from my first job.
Right.
So I get a job. I'm like, right, I've got a job. Great. Well done, Kev. You've achieved what your father told you should achieve. Go get yourself a job, Kevin. So I got a job and I got fired. And I'm like, Christ, I've been I've failed, like literally failed at life. And then my second job I did okay at, and then things sort of snowballed from there, and I've sort of had a career, since then. But this sort of fear of failure, and I think everyone has it, don't they? I mean, the whole imposter syndrome thing, and I do refuse to believe everybody has imposter syndrome. It could just be that some people are a bit crap. But you know what I mean? It's like not everybody can have imposter syndrome. Because it's like some people are below average, because otherwise there wouldn't be an average, right? There has to be a sort of. But most people do suffer, in some way from a little form of, doubt and self-doubt. I think if you're good at what you do, you automatically suffer from self-doubt. I think crap people don't, because they're not self-aware enough to know they're crap. But so this fear of failure definitely motivates me. And the answer that sits in the middle of those two is, since I was 21 years old, I've been waiting for someone to come along and tell me to get a real job. Because I refuse to believe that what I do for a living is actually, I mean, like, because my dad was an engineer and my granddad was a miner and my mum was a nurse. Like, these are all jobs that people have in textbooks when you're a kid, right?
Yeah.
Or that game of Consequences where you've got a frogman's hat and a ballerina's legs or whatever.
Yeah.
Real jobs. So I refuse to believe that sitting here wondering whether people who drive Datsuns eat baked beans is actually a job, and And now, I mean, like, I go around the world talking to people about storytelling or creativity in the way that you talk to them about fun and play and, you know,
Yeah.
comic. And you're sort of going, really? I mean, I've reached 51 and no one's
Yeah.
made me go and get a job, sort of mucking out the horses or something. Do you know what I mean?
Let's just not tell anybody that.
I'm thinking this is the case because
I really think I think somehow we've managed to sneak through the cracks of getting a job.
Have I now messed up? Because by coming on this podcast, I've sort of outed myself and sort of raised myself up.
Yeah.
Maybe
So just
maybe those people are coming now to
yes, you are now going to have to. Yes, you are now going to have to go and pick some lettuces.
Well, I did have obviously my early days. If we get into this,
of all the jobs I could think of, hang on, where did picking lettuces? Because I was going to say you're going to have to work in the steelworks, and then I realised that they've just been made.
I never picked lettuces. I didn't plant lettuces for a job.
Of course you did.
I picked daffodils, cabbages, winter greens. So because I grew up in Cornwall, I had a lot of jobs. And also, there was no such thing as health and safety, and no one was looking. So I started work on a farm at the age of 12 to get money.
Yes.
And at the age of 14,
started working in a nursing home when I was
to chop down, cabbages and whatever.
I'm there with you. I mean, I started work at 12, and I think it was my second job was in a nursing home. I don't believe 12-year-olds should be helping old people drink sherry, but let's just say that was where I went. Very good. Love that. Love what keeps you motivated. Question number 3. Yes. Question number 3. Are you ready, Kevin? How do you play?
I don't think I'm very good at it.
Okay.
So I have 2 children who are now 22 and 19, so they don't expect me to play with them. I probably wouldn't even if I asked them. But
right.
I don't think I was natural at it. And when I was a kid, I played a lot when I was a kid, but mostly, I mean, this isn't a sob story. When I was a child, I loved being alone and I hated being lonely. So I loved playing on my own as long as there was the option to go and play with somebody else. So I would often say no to going out to play so that I could play on my own.
Right.
And I would have hated the thought there was no option to go out and play. So I think a lot of the games I played when I was a child were very solo, and like I say, sort of devising political systems for a world of plastic dinosaurs. How do I play? Mostly with my dog.
Okay.
So I love my dog. I consider myself a great dog person. I walk my dog twice a day. I love messing around and playing with my dog. That's how I do it mostly.
All dog owners are nodding their heads.
I play so much in my head. Now, as an autistic person, my head is where it's kind of my greatest playground and my worst nightmare is my head. And I spend a lot of time in my head trying to make sense of what's going on inside my head. And that's probably where, if it's play, I don't know. But if I want to flatter it as a playground, that's probably where I do most of my messing about.
Yeah, I love it. And, and as you know, I've spent quite a lot of time in the world of play, and as adults, how do we play? And one of the ways that I've identified this, I believe that there's 12 ways that adults play is dreamer, where everything is going on in your head. Now, some people will just then sort of look off to the side and they'll just be in their head and they're really content. And quite often as kids, they were the ones that were told off for they're not concentrating or not, but actually they're creating what, and that's play. Of course, that's play. So yeah, I think you've definitely been playing.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think with the modern prevalence and growth of sort of the right diagnosis of so many children with ADHD or ADD. My eldest has autism with ADD. My youngest is just autistic. But the ADD thing, it just drove me, like the fact that once that diagnosis came in, you realize, no, he's not disruptive. No, he's not paying attention. You can't criticize a child with ADD for not paying attention any more than you could criticize a child with one leg for not winning the sports day. It's not that he doesn't want to concentrate. He can't concentrate. You'll have to give him written instructions. By the way, Em, I've just noticed brilliantly that I've got my mum over my right shoulder and my wife over my left shoulder.
I mean, it's as if...
that was not curated.
I love that. I'm so grateful that they are really omnipresent with us. That is lovely. Question number 4. What is one action that you've taken in the last year that's really impacted your life?
I sold my company, or my portion of my company, and went out on my own. Just me.
Wow.
No longer any partners, no company, no office, no colleagues, nothing. Just me on my own. So that's probably the biggest decision I've ever made in my life.
How did you get that brave to do that? Because for a lot of people, that's really super scary. How did you do that? Did it just feel right?
So, genuinely, to repeat myself, having the support of my wife, who just said, if that's going to make you happy, going to make you more fulfilled, going to make you a better... Because I said I wanted to do it to make myself a better husband, a better dad, and a better me. Right? So I realized that's what would make it. And I'm going to flatter it and say I had what I think is the only epiphany I've ever had in my life about 18 months ago, which is what drove me to take the decision. Maybe 2 years ago now. And I realized that I loved my work and I hated my job. And I think people don't separate those two things enough. So people think they don't like what they do for a living because they don't like their job. And it's like, no, you may love what you do for a living. You just don't like it within the confines or the structures of the job. And I realized my job for 10, 15 years had been to be a chief strategy officer. You know, the lead strategist in a company where I had a department and a management team and all of this. And, you know, if I think back 6 years ago, I worked for a company that had 1,000, 1,200 employees. My department that I headed had 75 strategists in it. You know, I was in a corporate environment, you know, with a board in New York and, you know, management team in London. And you realize whatever it is you do, you're sort of forever at the whim of someone else. Even if you're a chief executive, if you don't own the company, you don't run the company, you manage the company on behalf of someone else. And I came to realize this, that whatever it is we'd done, and we had been very successful, myself and 3 partners called Mick, Charlie, and Claire, we've been incredibly successful. And then a ridiculous decision was taken by someone out in New York to employ someone totally ill-fitted to run the company. And then the 4 of us were just sitting there looking at it going, and it made me realize in the first instance to quit corporate life and set something up on my own with some partners. One partner in particular, a brilliant partner called Mick, who I co-wrote my book with, who I'm doing all sorts of collaborations still with. But then, a year ago, I mean, Mick was the brilliant partner in my business, and, you know, I love him to bits. But about a year ago, no, 2 years ago, I realized I hated my job, her job. I didn't want a company. I didn't want colleagues. I didn't want a team. I didn't want to have to be responsible. I would like the decisions I took to not have to keep thinking, well, I want to do the right thing, but I should do this thing because there's 12 people whose mortgages are depending on me. And suddenly you go, okay, you free yourself from all of that. You said earlier what gave me the ability to be brave enough to do it. I don't think it is brave. I genuinely don't. I think it's less brave because now it's just me. Just me. I don't have an office. I don't have, you know, it's me with clients. It's a much less brave environment because I will now say I only work, with very few notable exceptions. I only work with people now. I've got a principle. I'll only work with people I know.
Right. Okay.
So they know me. There's no risk involved. We've worked together. There's no risk in the sense that if I say something to them that's brutally honest, they're not going to go, if they fire me, it's me. If I'd done that before as a person who runs a company, oh, we've lost that revenue, so I've got to make these people redundant to this person's just had a kid, that person's just bought their first house. You know, you can say it's brave, but I suppose being the son of a nurse and various things, I think the word brave gets very overused, particularly in the context of making some adverts or something. That's not really very brave, is it? You know what I mean? Mate, go and chat to, I've had mates in the forces, and I've had mates who've been like firemen and,
Yeah,
it's a much overused word, bravery.
It's an interesting, and it's interesting to hear somebody say it in that context, because I think there's been a lot of people that I've interviewed and met, whether it's doing my previous podcast or just being out in the world like you, speaking, things like that. And there is, I think, you've twisted on its head and you've turned it on its head, and having been in a situation myself where I've had a team and you're employing people and then you're very aware of mortgages, babies, etc., to then go and just be just or whatever. And is it which way round is it? But I know that there will be lots of people listening who are so used to having that security of having colleagues, having a team, having IT support, that to leave it is a brave step. But I also understand from your perspective, it's, I can see it from both sides, right?
But to pick up on that, it absolutely is. The thing that's, so your dog or mine? I thought it was going to be mine out the door. I thought she was barking to come in. Yeah. So what I realized when I quit my corporate job at Ogilvy was, where it becomes brave is all your behaviors. If you've only ever had a job, well, every behavior that you ever have in your life is predicated on the fact that a magic man or woman comes along every 4 weeks and fills up your bank account.
Very true.
So whatever you do, you can get into ridiculous debt because you'll get money to service the debt. You can run things up. You can do whatever it is you do. The magician, magic man comes along every 4 weeks and gives you money.
Yeah.
When you don't do that anymore, like you say, you can call it bravery, you can call it whatever, but it's very weird. It's very weird to break. Look, we all know humans are creatures of habit, right? That mad thing that 90% of British families live on the same 6 recipes every week. 1 in 3 Brits eats the same lunch every day. We are creatures of habit, right? And algorithms encourage us to do this. You'll buy this book, so therefore you'll buy that book with an algorithm because it's basically the same book with a different dust jacket.
Yeah, that's why with Spotify, I love having that. I get William, who's my son. I also put some of his songs in, and then I purposely bring in random stuff into it, and Spotify just does not know what I like, and I love it.
You do it, don't you? Because look, I like Mozart and I love the Dead Kennedys. Now, there's absolutely no algorithm in the world that will put those two things together. So it's really difficult. The Dead Mozarts, I don't know. But, there aren't any other kind of Mozarts, are there?
I was going to say, that would be weird.
There may be some other Mozarts in the world who are still alive. I don't know about the surname. But so that thing of, there are lots of people who want to quit their job. Look, I'm very well aware I'm privileged, right? I've been around for 30 years. I've got a reputation. I know people. I do whatever. There are lots of people out there who can't quit their job, But what I would say to that is, if you live in the West and you're educated, right, you probably can. It's just going to take some planning. You can't do it tonight, but if you sit there and you go, okay, I'm not happy, I'm not fulfilled, I'm not where I want to be, I'm not doing what I want to do. Okay, by this time next Christmas, I will be in that position. And
Yeah.
you spend, Mick, who I'll mention again, who is wonderful, the best partner I've ever worked with professionally. He's the total opposite of me.
Right.
He's incredibly quiet. Our work relationship is a bit like Bernie Taupin and Elton John. He sits in the kitchen quietly banging out the hits, and I come out making loads of noise in a stupid pair of glasses. Do you know what I mean? It's pretty much exactly the same relationship. But what he always says to me is, Kev, people don't need to know what you're thinking right now. And I think if you make a plan for something you want to do, you don't need to tell your employer. You don't need to.
No.
And actually, it's absolutely delicious. When I knew I was quitting Ogilvy, I knew 6 months in advance I was going to do it. I knew exactly the date I was going to do it on. But my boss didn't. And I can just sit there in the quiet every day. In some ways, it's the happiest 6 months I've ever had. I knew I was quitting. I knew I was going. I could plan every day what I was going to do. You can be putting money away. You can be making financial decisions that means that your 6 month, money or whatever can last for a year. So that's what I would say. I think I don't think it's brave to quit your job tonight. I think it's stupid. Right? Don't be reckless. That's not brave. That's just stupid risk. But I think if you deserve, this is where I'll get philosophical for a second.
I love that.
Me, everyone deserves to be happy. And if you're not fulfilled or happy in what you're doing, if you're Western and you're educated, a friend of mine said this to me about a year ago, and it's really stuck in my head when I was sort of saying how worried I was. And you think about what you've got and your privilege and your sort of support systems. He said, Kev, you're always going to have a roof over your head and food in your fridge. I said, why don't you sort of realize that and then go and get happy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're so right. And, having coached hundreds, if not thousands of people now, one of the things, especially those that are in that, do I leave, don't I leave, etc. It is one of the things that I quite often say, put a date in your diary that you're going to leave by, and then you can work backwards because your future self already knows that you're going to be okay. And there's that thing, and you're so right. I love that word delicious. There's a thing. It's knowing that you are shifting. And as soon as you allow that shift, everything else changes as well. Because
in your head, it's amazing. In your head, you've already quit. But this is the best part about it. You've quit and they're still paying you. So in your head, you're being paid to create your future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Why would you quit? Then they'll stop paying you.
Yeah.
Don't quit until you've created all the circumstances within which your happiness can manifest.
And that's so true, and especially when you're thinking about impact, and how our decisions, have, because, it doesn't matter what job you are or seniority, everything, we do only get one life, right? And it is, and these decisions, and ultimately making those decisions so that you can, happiness is a lovely place to aim towards, but actually we can't stay in happiness all the time because it's actually too high energetic. And for me, it's like, how do we hit content so we can be happy and then feel the feels as well, up and down of all of our emotions?
I've spent a lot of time reading that book, The Happiness Trap. Very interesting book, very interesting thesis. The word I always use is comfy, right? So just whether it's content or comfy, the happiness thing. I always find it astonishing, that thing of, if you talk to any parent, right, and you say, what do you want for your kids? They go, I just want them to be happy. They go, what an impossible, pressure to put on yourself as an individual. So you're not happy. Most people in the world aren't happy. What on earth makes you think you can make a third party happy? I think it's that thing of, you're not going to make them happy. You can create the conditions within which hopefully they will be able to manifest a sort of comfiness in their life. But don't put that pressure on yourself to make another person happy, particularly if you're not happy. I mean,
Yeah, and I mean that's yeah, and obviously both of us being parents, it is that thing of, that not projecting, and how do we, and this is the thing, right? We all impact everybody around us, and a lot of us thinks it's about our words, but it's not about our words, it's about behaviors. If you're thinking about tech use and things like that, and young people are always seeing you on your phone, how could you possibly expect them not to, for example? But anyway, question number 5, Kevin, I'm pulling you back. Question number 5.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
It's all right. It's awesome. It's awesome. You're brilliant. How do you, which I think really does link actually really beautifully, how do you take care of yourself?
So I think what's, at the moment, as I'm prone to making ludicrous pronouncements, at the moment, something that sticks in my head a lot is what I keep saying to people, which is, if you want to get happy, get a dog. Right? So if you have a dog, right, every night you come in, something is ludicrously happy to see you. Regardless of what's happened in your day, right? Something will come up and treat you like you are the emperor of the universe, right? So that's good for starters. Also, if you have a dog, you need to walk the dog, normally twice a day. So you have a reason to get up in the morning and get out, and then you have a reason to get up and go out when you finish doing whatever it is you're doing. I think somebody gave me a song about 15 months ago. A really good friend of mine, who I won't say his name because he'd hate the thought that I said his name about this, but I'll be forever grateful for him introducing me to this song, and it's really helped me take care of myself. So it's a song called "Don't Let the Old Man In." Okay. I'm trying to remember the surname of the country and western singer who came up with Toby's his first name. But he and my Asperger's self won't stop me looking it up in a second. But the story that comes from it was, this guy was playing golf with Clint Eastwood, right? Famous actor, whatever. And Eastwood was about 88 at the time. He's now in his 90s, but he was about 88 at the time. And I'm going to look it up whilst I'm telling you the story. And he was playing golf with him, and he asked him what was he doing tomorrow, and the guy said to him, Toby Keith, the guy's name is. He died earlier this year, which is very sad. But he was playing golf with Clint Eastwood, and he said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And he said, "I'm going off to play. I'm going off to do a film called The Mule, about an old man who becomes a drug courier." And Toby said to him, "Why on earth are you doing that?" He said, "You're 88 years old. Everyone loves you. You don't need to work. You've got loads of money. Why don't you just play golf?" And he said, "I do it." So he said, "I only do 2 things." He said, "I'm doing it so I don't let the old man in." He said, "The old man's coming for you. He will come for you." Right. He said, "Every day I only do 2 things." He said, "I go outside and I don't let the old man in." Right. He said, "He's coming for you. He'll knock on your door. He'll try and get in." He said, "Don't let the old man in. Never let the old man in." When the film came out, he thought it was amazing, Toby Keith, and he went away and he wrote a song about it. And it contains some amazing lines like, "Ask yourself how old you'd be if you didn't know the day you were born." Right? Like, you'd be as old as you thought you were. Right? And there's lines in the song like, "Get up and go outside, don't let the old man in." Yeah. The amazing postscript to it is, when the film came out, it's the song that plays over the closing credits now.
Oh, nice.
Because Eastwood loved it so much, he played it over the closing credits. But that's the thing. How do I take care of myself? Having the dog going outside every day, you don't let the old man in. Just get out. Just get outside. Honestly, dogs are brilliant for that. Just get out. Go for a walk. Go and look at things. Yeah. Go and take the dog. So that's probably how I take care of myself. And again, just to mention her for the 30,000th time, my wife really takes care of me, because I am my own greatest critic, and sometimes I blame autism for it. But I'm riddled with self-doubt. I do all this sort of stuff, and my wife is very, very good at just sitting me down and just making me realize, And look, to say something incredibly sentimental, when the greatest human being you've ever met in your life tells you you're okay, you tend to listen. So that's how I take care of myself. I let her do it because she's quite good at it.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, as regular listeners will know, there was Charlie making his occasional bark that he likes to and all of that sort of stuff. And, you know, you're right. You know, it is that thing of going outside and, you know, these decisions that we make in terms of, you know, what really matters. And sometimes, you know, life can be tough. And it's actually just going out and remembering that there's a whole big world carrying on that's away from what's going in your head. And then finally on the questions, the final question. What have you been thinking about in the last couple of days? So what's really been in your head? Might be work related, might be you related. What's been going on in the world of Kevin and his mind?
So we might take it down a bit here.
All right.
What's been really in my mind for the last 48 hours has been mortality. So I've been down at my old family home, emptying it because my mum's now dead. As I said, my father died when I was younger. I inherited the property. I'm trying to clear it. My mother was a big hoarder. So I've been down sort of clearing it and doing things. And it's astonishing when, you know, you're sort of faced. I'm 51 now, right? My father died when he was 48. So, you know, hopefully if I'm lucky and continue in reasonable health, you know, based on the average life expectancy, I will live for another 35 years and hopefully I do. But I've been faced with a lot of mortality. I've been finding, you know, a lot of cards that I wrote to my mother when I was younger. I found a letter that I wrote to my father a month before he died, which it was astonishing. I forgot I'd written it.
Of course.
So that's what I've been thinking about a lot. And again, to take the plane out of the dive, you know, I think when you face that, it sort of makes you realize just to sort of get happier about things. And again, that thing of go outside, don't let the old man in, go for a walk, go on the beach, take the dog for a walk, you know, read a poem,
Be
whatever.
curious,
You know, it's
right?
kind of, you know, life's pretty good, you know, and I think I have to remind myself, you know, it's quite easy to sort of get in a funk, get miserable, you know, watch. I mean, one of my favorite books I've been reading recently, and I genuinely would urge anyone to read it. I'm not about to get my own book out. It's this book here. Stop reading the news. The Manifesto for a Happier and Calmer Life.
Yeah.
You know, basically, if you just stop reading the news, right, or stop watching the news.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't tell you to do that. What it basically tells you is the news doesn't change as fast as you think it does. And if you watch 24-hour news, anyone on the news doesn't know the news any more than you know it because it's happening to them in real time, right? So check in with the news once a day, once every 48 hours. And mostly what it teaches you is that most of the stuff that's going on in the world, first off, the news is designed to make you either angry or miserable. The second thing is you can't do anything about it. There's a hurricane, a new pope, someone's become president of something. It'll make you miserable and stressed, and you can't do anything about it.
I so agree, Kevin. It's one of those things where, you know, I was listening. There's I really like him. I've met him a few times. Daniel Priestley. You know, I'll probably mention him a few times in this pod. He writes some really interesting stuff about entrepreneurship, and he tweeted something. This was a couple of weeks ago. And he said, and he framed it, news, negative events without solution.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I've been really conscious. And if I honestly think about what's really impacted me and how content, or your word, comfy I feel, it's been that beautiful thing of I just check in with the news once in a blue moon. And also the thing is, because there's a bombardment of 24-hour news cycles, people talking and analysing the news for a long time, if you listen to that on repeat, and I remember being in a seminar with him, and he actually sort of said, how many of you listened to Radio 4? And loads of hands went up. Oh, yes, I listened to Radio 4. I'm very clever. And the first 4 hours of your morning is filled with stuff that you can do absolutely fuck all about.
Yeah,
and most of it be really miserable.
Horrible, angry shit.
And the worst of humanity, right? And whereas actually, why would you not start your day with something that makes you chuckle? Yes, have some cognizance. But I don't think either of us are saying, don't go and look at anything to do with the news. But it's just that thing of going, actually, what voices do you let in? And if you're always listening to the news, you know what, you're right, you probably are going to feel quite depressed and everything else like that. And you could be listening to something that makes you feel good or challenges the way you think or being curious, you know?
It's not to sort of check out, you know,
No, not at all.
what's going
Not
on
at
in
all.
the world. Be aware, you know, particularly as a strategist, I have to be aware of a lot of things that are going
Of
on
course.
and how that impact various things. But it's so easy. But I'm very aware of my, you know, I am aware of my privilege, you know, and yes, but I just think it's very easy to let things get you down. You know, I mean, to bring it back to fun and play and you know, the role of comedy, you know, and it's, I mean, as you know, comedy's, you know, a fantastic antidote to this stuff because, you know, nothing can puncture stupidity and pomposity like ridicule.
Well,
You know, and
absolutely.
that's the thing. If you know, you can't come back from that. You can come back from someone shouting at you. You can't really come back from someone making you ridiculous.
And I mean, and that's one slant of humor without a shadow of a doubt. And I think there's just a thing of, you know, I think when we allow ourselves to actually engage more and more in humor and sort of spend time, you know, watching the things that make you laugh and things, like quite often I'll tell people, I'll be like, you know, rather than watching something depressing, just watch something that makes you laugh. Strange enough, you'll feel better. And those simple things can be the thing that can massively impact you, just like your mum did by saying that she really believed in you. And look at you, you've flown. And just like you have your awesome, beautiful, amazing wife that also does that. And Kevin, I could talk to you for hours, but I'm aware that you have, you know, I'm aware of your time. And then, of course, I'm aware of my good listeners' time.
Well, I've just realised it's 4:30.
I know. Aren't we good? There you go. There, you know, if you're listening to this at another time zone, don't worry. It's not 4:30 where you are. Don't be freaked out. That's just 4:30 where we are.
4:30 where someone is.
It's 4:30 somewhere in the world right now. So Kevin, how do people find you and your work? You know, all your awesome stuff about strategy and creativity and storytelling and all of that. How do they find you? Because we now know it is you. How do they find you and your book?
I'm probably the easiest man in the world to find, mostly because I'm sort of very gobby and needy on the socials. But you can find my website is kevinchesters.com.
I mean, that's easy. Good.
And if you want to read about my book and my philosophy on bringing more creativity to the world, which we need to, by the way, the World Economic Forum designated creativity as the #1 skill for business success, and UNICEF identified it as the #1 thing children need in later life. So we definitely need more creativity to enable people to endure the unendurable, overcome the insurmountable, and adapt to the unthinkable. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of what we need to do. So if you want to look at that, you can go to www.thecreativenudge.com and sort of find out all about what Mick and I were writing about that.
Awesome.
But I'm not hard to find.
No, and I will make sure that all of your links are on the notes so that people can really find you, even though you're not hard to find, even if people haven't got on the notes.
I'm definitely not. And also being 6'4" and what I am is, I'm also quite hard to miss if you see me in real life.
There is that. This is, you know, when you know, full disclosure, Kevin and I both met when we were both speaking at a conference, and it was like, you know, it's the short meeting the tall, you know, both quite gobby.
What I do have to say about and what I loved about meeting you was, and I wasn't making this up, it was the most annoying thing in the world that we were on different stages at the same time. Because if it hadn't been, as I said to everyone who was in the room watching me, if it hadn't been for the fact they turned up to watch me, I would actually have sacked off my own speech to go and see yours. I really wanted to see yours.
Which I will take as the highest praise. Kevin, thank you so much for giving me your time and giving all of us your time on the Comic Coach podcast. I knew I was going to love chatting to you and listening to you. And thank you for so much for sharing your truth about your mum and your wife, because it's these things that we all need to hear about how and who has impacted us, just so we take that moment to reflect. So I'm truly, truly grateful. So thank you very much, lovely man.
Thanks for having me. It's been absolutely amazing. And, you know, I wouldn't forgive myself if I also didn't mention the other lady in my life. Well, Pepsi, my dog, is the third lady in my life, but the other lady in my life who has inspired me, who's been a brilliant support to me, is my sister, who, you know, is very different to me, is a scientist, also a coach, actually, but, you know, Victoria. And she, you know, as you probably have gathered, I've had a very, very strong female influence in my life.
Well, I think we're all for that. And I love the fact that she got that little shout out at the end. You could be like, yes, and I did mention you, I promise. It might have been right at the end, but I did mention you and I love you, sis.
Well,
Thank you, Kevin.
Isn't it best to always get mentioned last?
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, that was Kevin. And we just obviously had a little bit of a chat after finishing recording and things. And, it's a fascinating thing, isn't it? Just asking these 6 questions around impact and where people go in their conversation. And bless him, he was like, I get really excited, so I'm sorry if I talked over you. And I'm like, it's fine. Because again, it's that thing of how he has been impacted. And I think the stuff that really landed with me, and there's loads that he said, that I love that word comfy. Somehow it feels even nicer than content. Comfy feels even nicer or something to aim towards, doesn't it? So again, just thinking actually that choice of language might impact me, and that might become the word that I use rather than content. So that's percolating in my mind. And then also what's percolating in my mind is that, the impact of our early caregivers that we have. Now, some of us will have had awesome childhoods. And like you said, he was really grateful for his mum, but obviously she was a pain because she's a human, right? And you hear how much his mum impacted how he lived his life, that he was allowed to carry on being creative and using imaginations and not being put in this box like the school wanted to do. And some of us will have awesome people that impact our lives. And, for me, mine was my dad. My dad, and he died when I was 10. But the impact that he had on me was deep and profound, because he showed me that it was possible that you could do different stuff, right? And I can't remember, so some of you will be new to me and new to my podcast. And one of the things when I really think about it, and this will gently hurt your head. So my dad was born in 1900. Yes, that's 1900. 1900. My dad lived and fought in both the world wars. Not my granddad, my dad. So my dad died in 1989. And so he was 89 when he died. And so, and as I say that, it's like, I know I am literally a miracle. Because my mum thought she was going through the menopause and then actually she was pregnant. And obviously my dad was 77 when I was conceived. So my dad, when I think about the impact of possibilities, and although he was only with me for such a short period of time, I mean, whether you believe in spiritual and, my dad's always been around me, and I know that he's always looked after me in one way or another. But in terms of being alive and watching and witnessing my dad, again, going back to that song, don't let the old man in. My dad, up until literally the 3 weeks when he was ill before he died, my dad was running, I think, 2 businesses. It might have even been 3. Everything was done with a handshake relationships. Because, I remember when we got a fax machine, and it was like the most revolutionary bit of kit that my dad had ever seen. And he had these amazing books where we used to, they were ledgers, right? So he used to invest in the stock exchange. So he used to write, in different colours depending on, the green was when it was going well and red was when it wasn't. And you can hear, right, as I'm saying this, and he used to have sweets. So my dad used to sell sweets. And for those of you that are very observant, you'll see that on my arm there, for those of you watching on YouTube, one of my tattoos is Bertie Bassett, because my dad was involved in Bassett's. He was a director, but he also then set up his own sweet company and was a middleman. Now, this business wouldn't exist anymore because there would be no reason for a middleman, because we've got logistics and things. But it's that impact and who has impacted us. And sometimes I think we dismiss the positive impacts that people can have on us, because I think we're so hardwired to not seek out. I don't believe that anybody seeks out the negative, but I think we highlight the negative. It comes back to the conversation about the news. It's like, who do we let in to us that impacts how we think about ourselves, which then has an impact with how we're living our lives? How many people have impacted you because they've said something and you've taken it to be true because you've believed them, because you've given them that power, and so therefore it stays true? And I know, having coached literally thousands of people, that all of us have had the positive impact and all of us have had the negative impact. But I think what we quite often do is we spend time so deeply aware of all the negative impacts that I think sometimes we can forget the positive impacts, and we can forget, those amazing people that have impacted it, us, impacted us, and who has impacted how I speak. I've been very blessed with having some very good vocal coaches who right there at that moment would have been like, sort your speaking out. I'd be like, sorry, Joe. So yes, so much from Kevin. And I mean, he, on a professional, Ogilvy worked at lots of different agencies, and now, talks about storytelling, creativity, and has done some absolutely awesome things in his life. And I just think it's so fascinating that, in the last 2 years, he made that decision that's impacted his life the most, so that he went off and started working by himself. So I wonder if you're listening to this, I wonder, what's the decision that's really impacted you the most in your life? Let me know. I love hearing from you. So let me know. I'm everywhere on social media. So obviously, I'm not everywhere, literally. Yeah, there she is again, trying to impact us in our life. Oh, there's the comic coach again. Go away. She's everywhere. No, actually, one of my friends would say, whenever I turn on Instagram, I only ever see your feed. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Do you only follow one person and it happens to be me? She's like, no, you just seem to be anywhere. Anyway, do let me know. Do let me know how this has landed. Let me know what decision has really impacted you in your life. I can't wait to find out what you're all thinking and what decision you're going to make that's going to impact your life in the good now. Oh, many, many questions to answer. It sounded a bit like Yoda there. Many things. Is that Yoda? Okay, good. We're going to leave it there on the Comic Coach podcast with me, Em Stroud, before I go off on another many thousand different tangents. I've been talking far too long today, so I'm enjoying myself far too much. Thank you for listening. If you're just new to this, which of course you will be, because this is my 4th or 5th episode, so this is also a new podcast, do please subscribe, tell your friends about it, and go, oh, you should have a listen to the Comic Coach podcast. It's awfully good. Obviously, if you think it's terrible, just don't tell it anybody. Do subscribe in all the places you can subscribe. Do share it in all the ways that you can share it. And of course, lovely people, do get in touch with me. I am Em Stroud. I am the Comic Coach. You have been fabulous and marvellous. Go create some awesome impact, because you know you can, and you know it's going to help you change the world. That was my ending of today. Thanks for listening. Chat next week. Bye.